Hi, I'm Paige, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how I made this dress and also this one. It's the same pattern, just different fabric. I used McCall's 7974, and you can see that this picture right here is actually almost an exact copy of the Cult Gaia dress right here, and it's come in lots of colors before. I'm not going to be showing the sleeve of this. I'm going to be doing the View A sleeve, which is the tie sleeve. That's my favorite one. And you can kind of mix and match with this pattern if you wanted to do the puff sleeve or a tie sleeve or long sleeve. I decided to do the sleeve on View A, and I've done the length of C on this one and the length of D for this one. So let me show you the tutorial first, and then at the end of the video I'll do a full review and you can see the dress in motion and full action, and I'll give a cost breakdown of the dress. Let's get right into the tutorial. So the first thing we're going to do is baste where we're going to be gathering on the bodice, and that's going to be at the shoulders and under the bust point. So I just ran it through the machine to get 2 lines of basting, and that's going to create nice even gathers. Then we can start construction. So I'm going to be doing the shoulder seam, and we're going to match up the match points on both of these pieces before we start gathering that middle section. So match it on both sides. And then you can grab one side of that gather and just pull it and distribute those gathers evenly and pin them into place. And then stitch that seam. Then we're going to get the inside of the yoke and the 2 facing pieces of the front of the bodice and finish the exposed edge, which is kind of like the outer edge if you're looking at it from this perspective, and attach it to the yoke and iron it. So now we're going to take our outer bodice and then the inside and pin them together around the neckline and stitch that. Once it's stitched, then you can go and iron everything. So you're going to iron the facing toward the seam and then understitch all the way around. You can see that this understitching is going through the facing piece, the inside of the yoke, and it's going through all of the seam allowance. Now I'm going to trim that seam allowance down to reduce the bulk and clip all of the curves around the neckline. And because we're going to be turning this, we want to clip a lot of notches into that curve so everything lays smooth and flat. So now we can turn everything as it's supposed to be and press it. So everything looks good to this point. And now we just need to attach that inner yoke on the shoulder seam from the inside and just pinch the seam allowance and stitch that right along the original seam line, and that will anchor it down really nicely. Now we're going to be using the back of the bodice and putting it to the back of the yoke, the outer side of the yoke. And I just pinned that, and then we're going to do a really cool method called the burrito method, where you roll up the front of the bodice and the back of the bodice, and you're going to kind of wrap those bodice pieces in the yoke, where from the outside all you're seeing is the inner and the outer yoke, and their seams come back to each other, and I'm going to pin them together to kind of create a sandwich where the 2 yokes are on the outside and the back of the bodice is on the inside, and I'll stitch that. And when you pull everything out through one side of that burrito, everything is nicely enclosed, and you can just press that and it looks really, really great. Now to attach the midriff piece to the bodice, you're going to be getting the uninterfaced piece first and matching that up with all the match points of the bodice, and then right here in the center you're going to be gathering it. So I have everything pinned, and then I'm going to take that inner midriff piece and pin that as well along that bottom edge, and then on that front edge as well, and stitch all the way along that around that corner. Clip the corners and pull everything facing the right side, iron it, and baste along those open edges. Then you can sew the side seam, and I'm just going to be doing a French seam. So I'm going to put the wrong sides together, stitch, trim, and then iron. And then I'll sew the right sides together. And I have it a really nice enclosed seam. You can see at this point the bodice is really starting to take shape. Now we just need to add the sleeves. Around this keyhole I'm going to be doing kind of a stay stitch. I'm just going to stitch right along the edge in the seam allowance to stabilize it. And then I'll be adding this bias strip and stitching that closely, about 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to fold it over. So I'll fold once and then fold the whole thing to the back and pin it and then stitch it. You can clip away that excess. And then it looks really nice at this point, but I wanted it to lay perfectly flat. And to do that, I just kind of folded it and sewed right just a tiny little triangle to kind of create a little fold. That's all we're doing, but you can always just leave it like that and not create a fold too. But that's what the fold looks like. It's just so tiny. Kind of narrows that. See, this one right here doesn't have it, and it just looks a little bit more open. And then you're going to be doing your basting along the top of the shoulder between the points. And now you're going to be doing a French seam on the sleeve, just like this. And now we can create the tie. So you're going to get your tie pieces and fold them right sides together and just stitch between the matching points from the tip to that point, and it will end up looking like this. You just trim out the excess so that you don't have a really bulky tie. Turn it right sides facing out and iron it nice and smooth. And the tie is ready to be attached. So you can see this open piece we're going to be matching around the sleeve and just aligning the match points and gathering the sleeve into that tie. This is what it looks like when it's pinned. And you just stitch from the side, one side of that little keyhole opening to the other. And then that gets sandwiched into that tie. And I like to pin this really well before I stitch it, making sure all my pins are really close to each other so that I catch both sides when I do the top stitching. So I'm going to top stitch from the very tip all the way across to the other side, and that creates a really nice enclosed tie around the band of the arm. And you can tie a cute little bow. Now we're going to set in the sleeve, and we're just going to put our right sides together and match all the matching points. The top, the sides, the under side of the sleeve, and the armpit. And then those basting lines, you can ease that in and stitch the sleeve into place. And then to enclose the raw edges, I just went around and sewed a bias strip and clipped the curves before I went again and pinned everything into place. So here I'm just folding it 2 times over and pinning everything around that seam allowance. The sleeve's attached, I'm just encasing that to have a nice clean finish. And that is what it looks like when it's done. You'll iron it toward the sleeve, and that's it for the sleeves. For the skirt where the button band is, you're going to have that piece interfaced, and then you're going to finish the edge of that in whatever method you want to, and attach the back pieces with French seams and the side pieces with French seams. And normally there's pockets, but I decided not to do pockets, so I'm just going to do French seams along the sides. And then I ran two basting lines in order to gather the skirt into the bodice. But as we always do, we're going to match up our side seams and all the matching points before we gather. Then you can gather it. And this little overhang of the button band, you will just leave hanging for now and stitch the skirt. And I went ahead and stitched a line and also ran that raw edge through my serger. And this button band, you're going to fold it back onto itself and stitch it and turn it right side out, and that creates your button band. But that's going to be pulling your seam allowance down, but it's naturally going to want to be pulling up. So right here, you're going to clip that to where they can go their own way. You can see that seam allowance is pointed up and this one is pointed down. You can anchor that point with a couple stitches if you want to. For the bottom of the button band, you're going to do the same technique where you fold it onto itself with right sides together and stitch just right across that point. And you just trim that a little bit and pop it out like this and press it and press up 5/8 of an inch, and then tuck that raw edge in, iron it, and stitch it, and then you have a nice small hem. You can use your pattern piece to mark your buttonholes and add your buttonholes with your machine. Don't forget to use fray check, and once that's dried, you can open up the buttonholes. You can open them however you want. I always use a seam ripper, and I always test to make sure my button slides through nicely. To mark where the buttons go, I always trust where my buttonholes are. So I pin everything and then make a little mark and stitch my buttons down. And that's it. When I was done with the dress, I had some leftover scrap fabric, so I made a matching scrunchie, and you can get the tutorial for that down below this video. It's so fun to make a dress and then make a matching accessory. It really adds that nice final touch. But I know what you're waiting for. May I present the dress? Turned out so pretty, didn't it? Well, the cost breakdown. So the fabric was $29. The thread was about $3. I attributed $1 to the interfacing, which is not expensive at all. And when you get a big piece of it, you only use the little strips of it for the button band, so it amounts to very minimal cost. And then I paid $5 for the mother of pearl buttons. So that's fabric, thread, interfacing, buttons, and that's pretty much all you need. The little bias strips that I used to finish the edges, that was just some scraps that I had on hand, and you really could use the scraps from when you're cutting out this fabric, so I decided not to account for that into the final cost of the dress. I had the pattern on hand, but if you're buying this, you're gonna have to add that to the cost of the dress. And I can't exactly say how much this will cost you because you might buy it on a sale or full price, but I left this out. So for the full cost of the dress, it was $38. And I just think that's so cool to make something that is perfectly tailored to you and exactly what you want it to be, and it can cost so much less than a designer dress, and you have this personal connection with it because it's absolutely made for you. As always, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up down below. You can click subscribe and the bell alert next to it to get notified anytime that I post a video. You can find a bunch of information down below the video in the description, like a link to my blog and any of the supplies. I'll link that there. And of course, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section. I'm really happy to get to them as quickly as I can. So until next time, go get creative and make a dress that you love. Bye!